What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel and you check out the content. And with that being said, I want to speak on a comment that Stephen A. Smith made about the Duke Blue Devils and their loss to Houston, right? In the Final Four. And when I was watching the Final Four game, man, I was impressed with Duke. Young team. I think that Duke don't have as many upperclassmen as Houston did. Houston they have an older, more mature team, and I think for like the two top players, Knipple and Cooper Flag, like 18 and 19 years old, man, that's just crazy. And for most of the game, and Duke was in the lead for most of the game, right? I seen Cooper Flag make a couple really good defensive plays. I don't know who the guy was for Houston, but he did a nice drop step move on a baseline to get around Knipple, and he shot the shot. It was gonna go in, but Cooper Flag just got up, man, and just blocked the shot, sent it into the stands, right? And that was impressive. So Duke looked pretty. They look good to me all game except for that last minute and a half. And so Stephen A. Smith said that Duke was ill prepared to handle the defense of Houston, right? And I gotta really disagree with Stephen A. Smith, right? Because if that was the case, if Duke was ill prepared for Houston's defense, then Duke would not have been, they wouldn't have been in control of the game for most of the game. Where they lost the game was that last minute and a half. It's just like things just went wrong. Um, the referee made a bogus call against the guy, Cooper Flag. So I don't think I think they did a really good job of handling Houston's defense. Now Houston did wear down on their defense was wearing down on them. And I thought that if the coach, I don't know if I don't even like I asked some people, right? Do they think that Duke coach was out coached? And to my surprise, they said yeah, they thought that Duke coach was out coached. And I didn't feel like he was out coached. I just think that last minute and 30 seconds, like some things just happened so fast that like you really couldn't react to it because things just happened so fast. Now you could tell that like I said, the defense was wearing down on him. So he have called a timeout and instructed them, and kind of just managed the game a little bit different, and probably so. Probably so. But when you look at even if you look at the championship game, when you look at Florida and Houston, Houston lost to Florida, down the stretch too. And what's the coach for Houston? Calvin Sampson, a very good coach, been around for years, and so things just got out of hand for Houston, like really fast down the stretch, not even really giving him a chance to make any adjustments. And sometimes things come down the pike, unforeseen things come down the pike, and if they happen real fast, it's hard for you to make an adjustment. Even if you're on the court or if you're a coach, bam, things just happen. And for the most part, that's what I thought happened to Duke and their that young team they had. If they could have just weathered that last minute, um, look, like the last minute and a half, they had the game in hand. Although, and even though, like Stephen A. Smith said, for like the last 10 minutes, I think they only scored like 2 points or something like that, or 4 points in the last 2 minutes, but they still had the lead, and so I think that if I'm Duke coach, I probably would have called a timeout and had them run some plays to either draw some fouls or either get good shots to get us back into, get us back in the offensive rhythm. They was playing pretty good defense, so that wasn't an issue. Duke was playing good defense, and it's not like it was easy for Houston to score. But I just really just gotta push back on that. They was ill equipped to handle that defense because how can you explain them being up for the majority of the game? So that's where I push back on Stephen A. Smith. And as far as Duke coach being out coached by Calvin Sampson, I don't think I don't think he did a I don't think Duke coach did a bad job of coaching the game. I think Calvin Sampson's plan to, like he's been doing all season with Houston, they just been wearing people down, you know, so especially the good teams, they'll just wear you down. You might think that you hanging in there, and then like by the middle of the second half, you find yourself they just keep coming at you and coming at you, and then it wears you down. It's sort of like how South Carolina, the women's team play at South Carolina with Dawn Staley. They just wear you down. They don't have like if you look at the South Carolina Gamecocks women's team, they don't have like a really like a number one offensive scorer, but their scoring is balanced and it comes from all over the place. They don't have a number one defensive player. They have like they have great team defense. So the team is wearing you down. So it's hard to really single out a player, a weak player on the offensive end of Houston, and it's hard to kind of single out somebody who's weak on defense because they just wear you down across the board with this, with whatever five they have on the court. And so that's what happened, man. They just wore them down, and they caught a couple breaks. I thought, and I really don't like when these referees, man, just make calls down a stretch that change it changed the momentum. Like you'll have, I think you want the momentum change to come from like a player on the court, not a call, especially coming down a stretch when both teams are just grinding it out. One team's trying to catch up to another team. The other team is trying to prevent that team from catching up. And then here you go with a referee making a call that'll give the other team the momentum. And I never like that. I never like for the referees to decide the game with a foul call and then awarding somebody a free throw. Just allow these kids to play. Because that's how they got to the place. That's how the game got to that point where they were. Um, these referees, man, I just don't dig the way they just be officiating these games. And so that's what that's why I think that call down the stretch, Cooper Flag, the bogus, and when you look at the replay, it was a phantom call because Cooper Flag really he didn't even foul the guy, and so that's why I think, and from the ref's angle, he might think that it was a foul, he might have seen a foul, but again, if you're a referee and you're not sure, then you have to swallow that whistle, and especially if you haven't been calling it that way the whole entire game. You've been allowing these guys to play physical at both ends. You know, um, Houston is a very aggressive team on defense. They're also a physical team on defense. And up until that point, you know, Duke they had been holding their own as far as like up against that defense. The defense really didn't dominate the game, I don't think. Because had they dominated, then like Duke would not have been in the lead for most of the game, like I said. So, that's why I gotta really push back, because it's just when you have a situation like that, man, you just had two good teams just was battling out and like a race, you know what I mean? Like you got like a race, and then you sometimes somebody just come on strong down the end. And when somebody finish strong like that, you gotta give them credit. You gotta give them credit. And that's what happened. Houston finished strong. Um, minus that call, like I said, minus that phantom call. But I think Houston they just kept plugging away, and they finished strong. but you can't fault, Duke for that. Duke just kept, they kept, it was almost, if it hadn't been, like I said, for that call, I think that Duke probably still would have won that game, even though like they had maybe as far as scoring, Duke had as far as their scoring, Duke had like kind of went into like a lull with their scoring. Their scoring was cut down. But other than that, man, I think these two teams, it was a good game by both of them. I don't think that, like I said, Calvin Sampson outcoached Duke coach. I don't think that because if that's the case, then why not just say, well, Duke coach, he outcoached Calvin Sampson for 3 quarters. Now all of a sudden, Calvin Sampson know what he doing in the last minute, a minute and a half. That's that don't make sense. So that's my take on it. Got to disagree with Stephen A. Smith, but with that being said, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment. And I will check you all out in the next video. Peace.